I was connected to Source as well, and it all came together in my life review, and I could feel everyone, and I could feel myself, and I had compassion on myself and other people. The way as parents, when we have a toddler or two toddlers, say they're playing, and you know, one gets mad and pulls the block from the other, and we're not thinking of that toddler, you're evil or you're bad, or now you're not going to make it to heaven, you know, or if your toddler runs down the hallway and trips and falls, it's not, you know, I'm going to write that one down. It was like everything was it. I just understood everyone like children, and I wanted for everyone, including myself. And in that life review, I was able to feel for myself the way we would feel for our own children. And I had this compassion for myself, where I wanted for myself to be happier and to do, you know, to do better, not as in, you know, get the higher grade, but just to be happier, that kind of better. Like, have fun, lighten up, it's okay, you know, and things like that.
Okay, if God is a good, loving God, then how is it possible that he could allow the evil and the horror that obviously exists? How is that possible if he really does, if God is pure love? And so I think that religions had to invent an anti-God to explain that. Oh, that's not God, that's the devil doing that stuff, right? Well, that means God made the devil too. You know, so I mean, it doesn't add up. But I can tell you one thing for sure. There was no judgment. There was no atonement. There was nothing that I had ever done that was completely forgiven. And forgiven in that context meant it was gone. It did not exist. You know, the stupid little boneheaded things I've done in my life that have been, you know, well, let's just say less than wonderful. I didn't have to atone for that. God wasn't holding me accountable for that. God was loving me right through it, and it was total and complete forgiveness.
I start watching kind of in 360 Technicolor in the atmosphere around me, all of the events of my life unfold, and it was incredible. The great decisions that I had made, the contributions that I had made, the little small things that I'd done to make somebody's day, and then there were the things where I hadn't used great judgment. And the one thing that really sticks out that just tickles me and shows me that the universe has this incredible sense of humor is there were these cringeworthy moments, absolutely, where you knew what was coming. And if I have to tell you that there was any kind of experience or any kind of negative aspect of the experience, that was it, and it's not even negative. It's that kind of, ooh, I see what's coming up, and I know what I did there. And you're looking around, well, who's judging this? That, you know, I was taught my whole life that somebody was going to be judging. So, you know, and I'm looking, and it's still just me and my cheerleaders, my guardians. And I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't how I was taught this works.
And we laughed and we played. And by the way, the light has a fantastic sense of humor. We would view some of the really silly things that I did in my lifetime, and we'd be laughing at how serious I took them. Because life down here is an illusion. It's a game. Don't take it so serious. The life has a wonderful sense of humor. And we're laughing and we're talking and we're just having a great time.
And I also discovered that God has a sense of humor because we chuckled at some of the events that we looked at. And that was very relieving to me. God is not or in my experience of all this, not judgmental in any way at all.
So I'm looking, there's no judge, and I'm realizing, oh, wait a minute, I'm judging this. Oh, well, I'm going to be really kind to myself here. And I'm seeing these experiences take place, and the feeling that I'm having is one of empathy for me in the decisions that I made with the tools that I had at the time, and for the other person who's experiencing my lack of judgment at the time, or what we might consider hurtful behaviors. And I'm watching, and I'm kind of very detached, and I'm going, okay, well, if I were doing that again, I might do it this way. And I'm thinking, and I'm integrating those thoughts. And that was it. There was no wrath. There was no judgment, just this peaceful, loving space of everything's okay.
We don't have to prove ourselves to be loved by God. That came with our creation. You don't have to be anything but what you are. Because what I learned on the other side is there is no judgment on us. None. Zip. Nada. We have to stop judging ourselves, because if God isn't judging us, what are we doing judging ourselves as harshly as we do by listening to that stuff in our heads?
You know, I actually believe that we can go beyond forgiveness. When we really start to realize that people are doing the best they can with what they know in that moment, regardless of what they've done, it's beyond forgiveness. It's more like empathy, compassion. It's trying to understand where they're coming from. And that goes not just with what other people do, but with yourself. And when you can do it for yourself, it starts to become easier to do it for other people. So start by being more empathic towards yourself. Whenever you do something that you feel you're judging yourself, I mean, how many times do you say things like, oh man, that was so stupid of me. How could I have done that? Or I should have done that differently. It's things like that. Watch that self-talk and tell yourself, no, I'm a beautiful child of the universe. I don't deserve to be talked to like that. And start to empathize with yourself. And when you can do that for yourself, you'll start to do that for other people. And you'll realize there's nothing to forgive. And I also want to add that in the other realm, there's no judgment, because there's nothing to judge. We are all love. We're all pure love. Unconditional love. So there's nothing to judge. And one of the most controversial things in my book, which many people ask me about, is about the fact that I say that there's no judgment, there's no hell, there's no punishment. When you realize that there's nothing to forgive, then there's nothing to punish either. People who commit acts that take them to prison while we're in physical life, yes, we have prisons here to protect us from people who live in so much fear that they can't be trusted not to cause harm. But when they cross over, they themselves understand in that moment of clarity, they themselves understand that everything they did out of fear. They did because they didn't know any better. Now, if you imagine, if you have a child who you have been punishing because they have been not just reckless, but destructive and harmful to other people, harmful to their siblings, so you have had to reprimand them, punish them, scold them. Now imagine if one day, when the child comes to you and says, oh my God, I've had an awakening. I understand why I did those things and how stupid it was of me. Are you going to burn them in hell for all of eternity? Of course not.
So I was like, well, here it is. I want to ask. And I kind of went up, and I didn't even have to ask, because the question that was there in my mind, well, which one is the true church? It was already in his understanding that it was in my mind. And at the same time that I was feeling this question, I was in his place, seeing myself from his wisdom and knowledge and background. And the way I saw myself asking was like a little kid who goes up to someone with maybe some more wisdom or knowledge. And it was as if I were saying, so tell me, which kind of cheese is the moon made of? Is it Jack, Swiss, or cheddar? And it was, he didn't answer me with words or even with that telepathic communication. He smiled at me, and he just kind of lowered his head in a way that I understood he was going to let me wait a while, whatever a while means, until I was ready to figure out what it was I really needed to ask.
I was being communicated to, not with words, but with waves of emotional, energetic energy that had, I sensed the power. First of all, the love was unconditional. I cannot stress that enough. And I say that, and I don't mean to offend anyone who has a deep belief in the Christian religion, but that didn't, what I experienced, that love that I experienced, did not fit with the story I've been told of how Christianity works. And because I knew the love was unconditional, flat out unconditional. And I wish I could go around and touch people and just have them experience that degree of love like I did, so they knew what I'm talking about. Because sometimes people get offended when I tell them that. That is not my intent to offend anyone or begrudge anybody's religion, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to express to you what I experienced.
What was shown to me when I died, like the idea of going to hell and suffering for all eternity, and oh, by the way, I love you. That didn't fit. A lot of the things just simply didn't fit, and it was, and it caused a great deal of torment. I didn't know something was wrong. It didn't add up.
The love I felt in the other realm, it doesn't matter where or who it was coming from, because all of us have different philosophies of how we like to see life. I don't like to put labels on anything. So whether the love comes from Jesus or Allah or Krishna or Buddha, it doesn't matter. Whether it came from my father, it's all God. The love was still unconditional. And that love that I felt told me that I was deserving and I was worthy of being loved. And it made me realize that it's okay to love myself. Most of us don't know this while growing up. While we are children, we don't realize, or even as we grow up, when we're teenagers and in our 20s, we don't realize that it's okay to love ourselves. When we're born, we know it's okay to love ourselves. When we're born, we're happy little children. Look at babies. Babies are so full of themselves and they're so joyful. And then we spend a lifetime getting it conditioned out of us. And then halfway through our life, we then start reading self-help books and going to courses to bring it back into our lives, to find it again. So what I want to tell you is that really, if you loved yourself, so many of your problems and issues in life would actually be solved and healed.
I'm pious in my beliefs, but I am not religious. And I found that religion for me, and I'm only speaking for me, was too limiting. It was too confining a box for me to be in. I no longer needed a priest to have a connection to God. I could go directly to the source, and I do constantly. I'm in constant contact and communication, and it serves me well. So we all have to find our way and what feels right to us. And I think the most important thing is to trust what you know and what you believe, because nobody knows better for you than you, not even me. So most of us, give our power away in certain ways to other people and circumstances. And I'd like you to remember never to do that, because You are your own God self, and you do know better. So.
Before he had a chance to answer, I said, you know, I'm an artist, and I would like to build you a shrine. If I were to come back to the world, I'd like to build a shrine. And I said, I'd make this shrine so big and beautiful and bizarre that people would come from all over the world out of curiosity to see what it was about. And what they would find was, it would be about you. And then that would make them think about you. And that's what I would like to do if he came back. And he said, I'd rather you didn't do that. And I said, what? You know, like I said, people have been building shrines to you, you know, forever. You know, there's lots of shrines. Why can't I build a shrine? I'd like to build a shrine. He said, you spent so much of your life hiding out in the studio, avoiding people. He said, I would prefer it if you didn't avoid people by building this big shrine. And he said, the other thing is, he said, I don't really care about shrines. He said, you know, people like to build shrines. And he said, I understand that it makes them feel good. But he said, it does absolutely nothing for me or for God. We don't have any use for them whatsoever. He said, if that's what amuses you, I guess that's what you got to do. But he said, don't do it for me. Don't deceive yourself in thinking that it's something that I want or need, because I don't.
But all those denominations or religions on this side of reality that we try to put into constructions of thought, it's lost its importance to me.
Irgendwie in Denkgebäude zu fassen, das hat für mich an Wichtigkeit verloren.
I had already believed it before, but I hadn't experienced that this faith is true. But if I'd compare this with an image, this experience demonstrates that everything is a lot bigger, a lot vaster, a lot more universal, and that it affects all of us.
Viel weiter, viel universeller und uns alle angehend ist.
It's probably just very little. Can I say it like that? But I don't want to be too cautious. I'll just say it. Faith is a crutch for this side of the world. It helps us to walk. For me, it's the Christian belief system, whether it is Catholic or Lutheran. Well, I believe these two denominations have so many common features and not many proper differences anyway. They never played a big role to me anyway. Faith is just a walking aid, and I won't need this walking aid anymore. This crutch.
We're all here to learn. We're all here to do better and be better. How you treat others and stuff. Oh, and there's no religion. That's the other thing. If you go there, there's no religion. There's no priest, there's no rabbi, there's no bishop, there's nothing. It does not matter. Nothing. So when I hear someone say, well, you're going to hell because you're not this and this, I'm like, trust me, you're in such a surprise when you get there. Because it's so not relevant. It's just not relevant. And the important thing is that you learn, however you learn about God and being a better person, however you get that experience, that information is good. Right, but there's no right or wrong religion at all. So long as you're a good person, you know, are following God and all that, that's what matters. Doesn't matter how you get there, but no, you're not going to go there and see a priest and a rabbi and all that. It does, no, not at all. It's so just not part of the process at all, at all.
And there are no churches there, not where I was. It wasn't about just one way. And it wasn't about doctrines and books, but just about a universal compassion and love for everything, for everyone. Animals, plants, birds, all of it. It's all together.
I had a friend who was a fundamentalist minister in Georgia who was raised in a very strict fundamentalist church. And he was absolutely convinced that only members of his church were going to heaven and everybody else would go to hell. And on the way to church one morning, he had a wreck in which it's amazing that he survived. But he had this experience of seeing everything he had ever done. He said what God was interested in was how I had learned to love. People who come back from a near-death experience will say that this being of light that they meet, who sort of helps guide them through their life review, you can't even come up with the words to describe what this love of this being is like. That we have to use the word love because that's the closest we have on the earth to describe it, but that it's so far beyond anything that we experience as love while we're here that words fail us when we're trying to describe it. People often go into these experiences thinking that it's going to be one of judgment, that that God has been keeping a book with all your making marks against you for various kinds of infirmities or muffs in life. And so they go into this with the attitude that they're going to be judged. But what they come out seeing pretty quickly in this life review is not a matter of judgment. It's a matter of how have you learned? What did you learn from this? And how have you learned to love? And people say that in this situation, you can see that the answer is obvious because you're surrounded by a panorama of every single thing you've ever done. And this being sees it completely. And yet, whatever is in that panorama, this being loves you completely. After this, people are inspired to try to be good and loving to others. Still within the framework of human failings, that it's still difficult, but at least that vision of the importance of love inspires them to get busy to try to bring it into everyday reality.